Hi, everybody. Welcome to Spaminar, the Society of Prop Managers webinar series for live theater prop professionals. My name is Larry Heyman. I'm a SPAM member, and I am a professional set designer and props professional. The Society of Properties Managers or Props Managers, known as SPAM, was formed in 1994 by a small group of prop professionals in the Midwest to address the issues of common importance and to create parity with other production departments. Today, we are an association of 150 plus professional prop managers. Prop managers and educators from nonprofit producing organizations, opera companies, education institutions, and more. We've built an international communication and support network that shares resources, information, solutions, and techniques, as well as safety information, continuing education, and stock. As with previous Spaminars, we're requesting pay what you can donate, donations to help support this programming and our annual grants for early career prop professionals. If you can afford to donate, links to donate will be in the chat. We truly appreciate any help you can give. We've enabled the live transcriptions for this webinar. If you'd like to use them, click on the live transcript button, click the live transcript button on the bottom, and then select show subtitles. Alternatively, you can click view full transcript to see the meeting side panel. I am really excited. I'm joined tonight by SPAM member Eric Hart, who I consider a friend and just an amazing colleague. And he's here to talk about how to set up and edit your props portfolio. Eric is the Director of Animatronics at the UNC School of the Arts. He's been building props, effects, puppets, and other fanciful objects for theater, opera, Broadway, film, and retail for over 20 years. Please feel free to share stories and ask any questions that you have in the chat. And as we'll leave the room, as we'll leave room at the end to trade and share stories and pose our questions to Eric. So let's get started. Eric, you ready?
Yes,
I'm
I
handing it over to you.
Thanks, Larry. Thanks for the great introduction. Thanks to all the SPAM members who have put this together. And welcome everybody to this Spaminar. Again, I'm Eric Hart, and I'll be talking today about making a props portfolio. It's something that everybody says you need. You might already have one and you want to improve it, or you want to help other people sort of make their own. So I thought we would talk about it. So I will just start off by sharing my screen. And away we go. So, building a props portfolio, showcasing your work as a prop maker. Here we go. Let's start off just saying what is a portfolio. Just get a sort of general definition. It's an edited collection of your work. For our work is building actual items, a very visual medium. So that usually comes in the form of photographs of what we build, and photographs of the items we build being used on stage or in film. So a portfolio is needed to showcase your skills and your method of work. It's a tool that every props professional should have. It's used when you're looking for jobs or looking for school. Those are the main things we think about, but there's also other reasons. Sometimes you might need to apply for scholarships or other opportunities. Or if you're like a lot of props professionals, you might want to kind of start your own side hustle or build items for outside clients or friends. So marketing for clients is important as well. You want to be able to show what kind of things you can build. So looking at all these different reasons for having a portfolio, whatever you're using it for, the things you want to do with it are going to depend on, are you applying for a job? Are you applying for schools or what? Jobs are definitely looking for the specific skills that they list in their job posting, right? if you look at a props artisan job posting, it'll often have a sort of laundry list of different skills, such as upholstery, painting, paper props, welding, carpentry, furniture building, fake food making, all that sort of stuff. These are skills that they really want their props maker to have. And so you want to make sure that your portfolio contains some projects that showcase these skills, right? They're also interested in whether you can follow a design brief. Usually in theater, our design brief will be a drafting from a designer, a set designer. It might be a photograph. If we're recreating historical objects, it'll be the actual object and how close you could get to it. But employees want to see, can you accurately reproduce the design of something? You're not making things up because you don't know how to build something. You're building it to the design brief. That's really important for jobs. And finally, working under time and budget constraints, right? If you take, say, 18 months to build a perfect prop, that's not useful to a theater who needs multiple props built within a 5 to 6 week window, sometimes even shorter, and with a specific budget. So it's really helpful to show that you work under these time and budget constraints in your props portfolio when you're applying for jobs. Now, applying to schools, it's a little different because particularly with undergrad schools, they're not really expecting you to have a lot of professional experience. In fact, most students don't have any professional experience. They might have some community theater experience, some high school theater experience, or just a lot of personal projects. So in that case, it's less about specific skills and it's more about your creative problem solving. How do you solve these problems, especially like these strict budgetary constraints? And the growth that you show too. I know when I'm looking through a portfolio from somebody applying for school, if they show a progression of projects where they improve and get better and better with each project, that tells me that they'll have a lot of success at school and that they're ready for this kind of training. So again, think about when you're putting your portfolio together, what are you actually going to do with it? Because that's going to determine how you organize it and what you put in it. If you are applying for a job, carefully read the job posting and see if they have any sort of criteria. They might be talking about the length, 3 to 5 pages, 5 to 10 pages, the format, a PDF, a series of JPEGs, things like that, and then what to include as well. They may want only pictures of final objects. They may want to see your process. They may want to see non-theater work. They may not want to see non-theater work. You really have to sort of gear your portfolio towards who you're showing it to and have they actually said specifically what do they want to see. Some things that I look for, now I've done both hiring people for about 10 years and then looking at both undergrad and graduate applicants for school for the last 6 or so years. But overall, I'm looking for kind of similar things, the overall quality of work and knowing what looks good. And it's not like I'm only taking people with a high level of quality. I want to see, is the person aware of whether they're doing good quality of work or can they understand their shortcomings? It's the hardest props person to work with is somebody who has something that is not quality and doesn't understand why. If somebody say their stitching is a little sloppy and they tell me like, yes, I just started working on stitching, it's a little sloppy, and so I'm continuing to work on that, then I understand that they understand the quality and they're just not there yet. The evidence of specific skills, of course, if it's for a job, again, can you run a table saw? Can you run a soldering iron? Can you run a sewing machine? These are the things I kind of need a person I hire to do on day one. So I'm definitely looking for that. Again, the ability to match the design, that's paramount with theater, film, television, opera, all of this. I also look for collaboration. Can you work with other people? how well do you work with other people? Can you successfully hand off a project to somebody to finish it? And then problem solving and creativity. And again, this, as I go through all the different things you put in a portfolio, this kind of comes out of the process shots. And so I'm going to spend a good amount of time talking about process shots. It's hard to get a sense of problem solving just from a photograph of a completely finished prop. That's just an object, an item. I don't know what it took for you to get there. So that's why process shots are so important. So something I also like to remind people and keep in mind, a portfolio shows what you want to do as much as it shows what you can do. If you have done projects and you don't ever want to do those again, then don't put things like that in your portfolio. If you really, really, really hate painting, then you shouldn't be sort of showing off a whole lot of painting in your portfolio, because then people who need painters will be hiring you to do painting. Likewise, if you want to sort of do some personal projects or outside work to kind of build your portfolio, do what you want to do, right? If you want to make like sci-fi space guns for film, then start building a bunch of sci-fi space guns, because people who are looking for that kind of work then see that you're already doing that. So make, as your career goes on, make your portfolio a reflection of your goals in your career as much as a record of what you've already accomplished. Before we get too much into it, then what kind of file format am I actually sending you? I like to think of a couple considerations. You want a format that's compatible with most computers, like a PDF. It could be viewed on your phone, your laptop, your tablet, a Mac, a Windows PC, anything. You want a format that's going to retain your formatting, so you could build your portfolio in any number of computer programs, but you want to export it in something like a PDF. That's a good format. You also want something accessible. So something like PDF is going to have, like, the text is searchable and it can be used by screen readers, and the images can be looked at. In short, if you don't get the joke of this slide, PDF is kind of the only format you should be sending your portfolio out in, unless it's just like a couple single images, because that's what they requested. So actually creating a portfolio page, right? Again, we work in a visual medium. We need images of our work. And so I'm going to be dealing mostly with photographs. The text is going to be very minimal. The images that you want on a portfolio page can include some or all of the following. Final images, a good high quality color image of your finished prop. Process images, which are images taken while you're building the prop. Either images you take, or maybe a friend or coworker takes an image, a picture of you while you're working on it. And again, I'll go into this more in detail in a little bit, because this is very important for portfolios. Production images means like an image from the actual show, the actual performance or rehearsal, a still frame from a film or television show. Not as important. I'll talk about that in a bit too. The design and reference images I find really helpful too. In determining how well you stick to the design brief, it's helpful to see what the design brief is. So if a designer gave you a drafting, if you're working from a photograph, if you've done your own research and you found your own photographs, put those side by side with your final images to show how close you got to the design brief. And something, it's not always possible, but something I like to do is try to frame my final image so it's the same view as the reference image, so I could do a side by side and you could really see like how close it got. And finally, non-theater work is okay. Again, especially if you're applying to school, but even in the professional world, any sort of artwork, class projects, cosplay, and other hobbies, if they successfully show off skills creative problem solving. If they're collaborative, if they show adherence to a design brief, they're all really great. They may not have the same time and budget constraints as theater, but they're helpful in terms of really fleshing out your portfolio. So again, a big warning. A full stage photo of a set is rarely useful in a props portfolio. And I see this a lot because the full stage photos are usually taken by a professional and they're really nice. They have nice lighting, so why not use it? But a lot of times they don't really tell me what you did as a props maker. If you have a great photo that highlights the use of your prop on stage, you can include it. But if it's a sort of general, like wide shot of the stage, and there's a whole lot of stuff on set, and you can't really make out what the prop is, it's not really useful. It should never be the only image on a portfolio page, but it can definitely help going on with other images. So you have your images, and next you want text and labels. And I'll give a caveat here because there are people who really push for minimal text and labels. I'm more of the persuasion that you should have enough text and labels that anybody can look at your portfolio without you being there and understand exactly what's going on. Because you're not always going to be there. You're frequently going to be sending your portfolio out, and people are going to be looking at it before they decide whether they want to interview you. By the time you're being interviewed, they've already looked through your portfolio. So it needs to speak for itself, and you need text and labels to do that for you. So your text and labels should describe what you did, especially on collaborative projects where multiple people worked on the prop, really describe which parts you did. And then label each image or page with information giving the context of that prop. For a theater, that would include the show, the designer name, the theater or venue, and then the position you held or what you did that is depicted in the image. And again, if it's non-theater work, instead of show, you might give it a title like personal project or commission project, things like that. And then instead of designer name, maybe it's built from history or something like that, or influenced by Star Wars, inspired by Star Wars. Just some kind of label to give it the context. Why did you build it, basically? I have a sample page from one of my portfolio pages. So you could kind of see it's got a number of images on it and some text. So starting up at the top is the label. It's a donkey mask. It was done for Midsummer Night's Dream at Triad Stage, and it was designed by Hannah Chalman. You could also put the year there. You could put other information there. This is kind of very minimal, but it's, it really helps give context. Next, for the description, what I like to do is kind of really basic, straight to the point. How was it built? It was sculpted in wet clay. The mask was created with baroform thermoplastic and plastic straw. And again, it was painted by the designer, and I put that in there so that this is not being used as an example of my painting skill. So I'm saying it wasn't painted by me. Down in that corner, I have a process photo. So this is showing the sculpting. It's showing how I'm referencing the designer drawing, how I'm building it on a form. Up here is my clear, well-lit final image. And for this page, what's really great is the size of it. It takes up the most room, and it's got a minimal background. So when you look at this page, that's what draws your eye, and that's good because that's the prop that I'm talking about. And finally, I do have a show image. It's a little cropped, so it's not the full stage, but it's just showing that it is a mask and that it's worn by the actor in a fairly physical kind of scene, which is helpful to know, but it also gives a sense of like the overall size in proportion to an actor. So I thought it was nice to include it here. So these are kind of, on all of my portfolio pages, this is generally what I'll include. Some will have more images, some will have less. Some will require a little more description, but overall, this is kind of the format I've settled on for my portfolio pages, and I consider this like a good portfolio page. Some design tips for your portfolio: stick with one or two fonts. If you have too many fonts, it gets really distracting. At most, you could have one for your headings and one for your general text. You can use bold and maybe different colors to get a little more variation, but too many fonts makes it look too busy and distracting. You want visual consistency with the design elements. So if you use any sort of borders, lines, color, you want to make sure those are consistent in all of your pages, and you want the margins in all of your pages to be consistent as well. This just makes it look clean. It shows that you can pay attention to the quality and consistency of your portfolio. In a sense, your portfolio is kind of like one of the first props that your future employer or university is going to see. So you want to show them that you take care designing your props, your portfolio. And finally, double check your spelling, your grammar, and your tense. This can be very embarrassing if your spelling is off. If you misspell names of designers that your interviewer knows, that's pretty embarrassing. And then consistency in tense is important. So the way you write a description on one page should be the same as on another page. Like, remember on my page, I said sculpted in wet clay. It would be inconsistent if later in my portfolio I started writing, I built this out of wood, and I started using I statements when I was using a real passive voice in that slide. Make sure it's consistent throughout. So there's your portfolio pages, and now it's time to organize your portfolio. Take all these pages together and put them in some kind of book. My advice is one project per page. That's kind of where I start off. Every page is its own project. One page fills a screen, one page fills a piece of paper, and sticking with one project per page is a good way to go. There are some props that are really complicated and do a lot of stuff and have a lot of parts. And so in those cases, you might want several pages, break it up into a multi-page project. Just make sure it's clear where that project ends and the next one begins. I know I give that advice a lot to students because it's not, they'll have a couple pages and I don't realize that one prop stopped and they're starting to show another one because their labels aren't clear. They don't have any sort of delineation or anything like that. So just make it really clear that these 3 pages belong to prop A and the next page belongs to prop B. I also sometimes, I'll put more than one project per page if I'm really trying to consolidate my portfolio. This is especially true of like minor props. So like my paper props, I'll have like 3 or 4 paper props on a page, and it's just, these are paper props. There's not much more to say about them than that, and they're not spectacular enough that they need a whole page. Do make sure that you have large, high quality images for the props that you're showing off. Your portfolio is a selection of work. You're not going to include everything. And especially as you work into your career, you can't possibly show everything. It depends. Everybody has a different sort of idea of how long a portfolio should be, but my general consensus that I've picked up is somewhere between 15 to 30 projects, and that, should equal 15 to 30 pages. I think 30 projects is a lot. That would be a lot for me to get through. I usually say like 20 is the max. So when you're thinking about what you're putting in, you really need a compelling interest to make your portfolio like longer than 20 pages, right? If there's multiple different categories of things you have or something like that. Because honestly, you you really only need like 5 to 10 really good props to kind of showcase your work. And sometimes you really only need like 3 to really showcase your work. So, this is good advice for people who are just starting out. Don't feel like you need to stretch your portfolio to get 15 projects. I don't want to see a lot of filler. If you, honest to goodness, only have like 5 decent props, just show those. If they are large, high quality images that give me a good sense of your skills and your growth as an artist, then that's all that I need. Never feel obligated to sort of fill out your portfolio with stuff that isn't great. So when I'm making my portfolio, I do it in PowerPoint. I like PowerPoint because it's really easy to move text and images around in a sort of collage style, which is the style my portfolio is. It's really easy to change the order of the pages, and it's easy to export it as a PDF that I can then send to people, to print as a book, and then bind. Um, and it also allows me to have a kind of a master portfolio, and then I can just make a copy and reorganize and delete pages for whatever job or whatever I'm applying for. So I could kind of generate custom PDFs uh, for whatever I'm doing from the same large PowerPoint file. So that's really convenient. That's really handy. Um, but when we're talking about the order, PowerPoint has this nice slide sorter, so you could kind of get a good overview of everything there and then put it in order. You really want to start off with one of your best pieces. This really has to grab the attention of who's ever interviewing you. And what I say is put your best piece first and then put a better piece second, because you want to show like you don't want them to turn the page and get disappointed. You want people to turn the page and get even more excited. So a better way to think about this is put a good project with a very striking image first, and then second, put a really good project that showcases your skills second. So you give them the sort of 1-2 punch. They're kind of saying, hey, this portfolio is going to be great. Look at how we're starting off. And you also want to finish with a really solid piece. Again, this happens more in in-person interviews, but people will look through your portfolio and they'll stop on the last page and then they'll start asking you questions. And that last page will be sitting there looking at you for 15 to 20 minutes. So you want that to be a really good picture. You don't want it to be like a throwaway image. Make sure you're ending your portfolio with something really solid as well. So again, adapt the order for every application. There's no reason you need to send the exact same portfolio to every job application or school application. Adapt the order. But you do want to follow a logical order. And this really depends on the kind of work you do. Some examples, you can do reverse chronology, where you start with your most recent work and you slowly work towards your earliest work. Usually this is a good order because it should be like your best projects are the most recent ones you did, and your earlier projects are the ones where you're still growing. Another way to organize it is by skills. Maybe you put all of your sort of woodworking carpentry projects together, and then all of your organic sculpting projects together, things like that. You can group it by genre, and this can mean whatever you want it to be. Maybe it's grouped by fantasy props and then historically accurate props, or maybe it's grouped by like fake food and then puppetry. Just as you do your work, your projects are probably going to tend to like clump together into these little groups, and so that's, you might find a way to organize it where it's sort of grouped together. You want it to be a logical order. You don't want to be giving the interviewer whiplash where they're like, I was looking at a little baby doll, and then I was looking at a decapitated head, and then I was looking at a pie, group it in some kind of order. My personal least favorite way to organize a portfolio is by show. Every time I see this done, it's confusing because the props you build for one particular show is just going to be all over the place. So you have like, oh, I did Midsummer Night's Dream, and here's a flower, and here's a scroll with some writing on it, and here's a stool, and then we jump over to and then there were none, and there's the liquor cabinet, and there's a bunch of breakaway bottles, and everything's just so random, and it just doesn't make sense. So I suggest I always tell people when they organize it by show, it doesn't really make sense. It's not a logical order. That's kind of for your resume, not your portfolio. So that's your digital portfolio, and I definitely suggest everybody have a digital portfolio, something you can send to people. But your second weapon in getting a job is your website. And this is going to be a little bit similar to your portfolio. In a lot of cases, my website is a little simplified from my portfolio. I'll have less process shots. It's usually more focused on just the final images, and again, with a digital portfolio, you're reading it from front to back in order, so the order is very important. With a website, the person can click through in whatever order they want. So something that's really important is to have clear navigation, right? A lot of times what this means is you divide it into categories and then put pages for individual projects. So you'll see on mine, or this example of mine, on the left sidebar, I have links for my props, for my about page, my resume page, and my contact page. And then on the props page, you have these categories: hand props, furniture, mask and puppets, and electric props. And then when you click on one of those categories, it takes you to the page. So we clicked on furniture, and it has individual projects. But the clear navigation you could see over on the sidebar, the props section has expanded, and you could see we're currently in furniture. And from here, you see we can navigate to any of the other categories, or back to the main props page, or to the about, resume, or contact page. The user knows exactly where they are in the website. They're not lost, and they know how to get to any other part. That's what we mean by clear navigation. So again, you click one of the props, and it brings up the sort of main image, and then it has kind of the same text and labels in my digital portfolio. Again, with the clear navigation, you can find your way back or to any other section. You're never lost. And importantly, the user is not missing out on a whole bunch of props. And that's something I see when there's not clear navigation. Somebody has some really cool projects, and I just totally missed them because I didn't know there was this whole other section. And they have to tell me, and I'm like, why wasn't this front and center? Why did you not have clear navigation? I just missed all of this. So your website, keep in mind, people are not looking at it in order. They're going to be skipping around, and you need to give them the navigational breadcrumbs to find their way back to the main page. And also include information about yourself and an ability to contact you. Obviously, that's very important. Social media. This has become necessary for networking. It is also very great for marketing. The question has been asked many times, can it be used as a portfolio? I don't think it's ideal for a portfolio. What makes social media great is people go to Instagram every day. If you're putting up pictures every day, every week, every month, they're going to see them every time they go there. People are not going to your portfolio website every day. They're going to go there when they want to see your work. So in order for your social media to be really successful, you need to be posting on a regular basis. And that probably means it's not necessarily like finished props. You might post a process shot one day. You might post a picture of you in the shop one day. You might just post something interesting that happened at work. Just, keep it professional if it's a professional page. But your social media is going to be an ongoing, continually updated website filled with images, as opposed to your portfolio, which is a much more static page, a static collection of images that is only updated when you create a new project. You don't want your portfolio to be updated every single day, and you don't want your social media site to never be updated. So the fact that they're kind of have conflicting goals going on is why I say it's not ideal as a portfolio, but definitely use it to post images from your portfolio. Definitely use it to bring people to your portfolio website and use it for that networking and that market. It's become so incredibly important these days. I know so many shops and people who find new people based off of their Instagram page or their TikTok or something like that. So take advantage, but don't use it as a instead of a regular portfolio site. So finally, process shots. I've been hinting at this. I like to think of a process shot as a story of how the piece was built. And thinking of it as a story is really important. We're storytellers, we're props people. What is the story that your process shot is telling? Um, it gives the story of your journey through the project. It tells me as a reader how you approach your work. And there's some other stories it might tell, such as giving a breakdown of the materials you use or revealing the interior structure of a prop, like framework or something like that. It might also document all the jigs and the molds and other custom tooling you use to make your prop, which is not present in the final prop, but is definitely necessary. And then detailing the process. So a breakdown of the materials used before it's fully painted, you get a much better sense of what's being used. And also before it's fully shaped, you get a sense of like the shape that the raw materials came in. So like this sword that was in process, you can see in this image that it was pieces of steel rod that were kind of starting to be welded and shaped, and then a big chunk of steel for the pommel, and then this wooden handle, and it's all separate, but eventually it comes together. Or these foams, they're pieces of vacuum plastic, and it's some PVC, and there's that sort of stuff going on. Um, Revealing the inner structure is really good for like furniture props or bigger props, just showing what's not readily apparent from the final finished piece. So how all the wood goes together, showing how you make it strong, what you did to make sure that it would stand up to the rigors of theatrical use. The jigs and the molds is always handy. So like this severed head, you could see it was a face casting and there was a mold, and that was all part of the process that shows like mold making process. Or this kind of ad hoc jig for this circle of letters showing how the shape was made. Again, it shows how you work as an artist. It's really important. And sometimes if it's possible, I like to try to tell as much of the story of the prop as I can in as few of photographs as possible. And so sometimes it's possible to really capture a whole bunch of steps in one image for making the prop. So like this image of these fake leaves, you could see there was a paper pattern I created. It was traced out of onto fabric and cut apart, and some metal wire was glued on the inside. All of that in one photograph. Same with that goblet on that side. Again, a little paper pattern. They were individual petals cut out of that thick cardstock, and then it was kind of soaked in water and glued on, kind of paper mache style. And you could also see I was using paracord as the little lips and ridges over it. So again, one image showing almost the entire story of how the prop was made. I consider those like the holy grail of process shots. It's not always easy, but if you could do it, it's really great. On the opposite end is too many process shots, right? I'm a big fan of telling people to photograph as much as possible, but if you put all those photographs in your portfolio, it's going to clutter it up and it's going to be hard to see what's going on. So again, thinking about what's the story, I look at all these images and they're not really telling different stories. I get the sense that this was made out of wood. I had some clamps. I was cutting some stuff, but really, I only need one of these images in my portfolio. I don't need all 8 of them. So when I was making my portfolio, I settled on this one because it kind of shows like, oh, that interesting curved edge. This is showing that it was a separate piece that was glued on, and also some of the other kind of carpentry that went into that. So again, what's the story? What are you telling? Limit your process shots to just what is necessary. And please don't forget photos of yourself at work. It's always great to get some sense of you working as an artist in your portfolio. Just 1 or 2 is fine. It doesn't have to be a bunch. Good. So that's process shots. I want to talk a little bit about photography, because no matter how good of an artisan you are, if you have bad photography, it's just going to bring your portfolio down. There are some common problems that crop up, common issues. Camera shake is a big one. You can see in this picture, it's blurry. That's because the shutter speed on the camera is so slow that the minute shaking of you holding the camera causes it to be blurry. That can be fixed with more light or with putting your camera on a tripod or somehow stabilizing it. Obviously, that doesn't work if the prop is moving itself. It's only if the prop is absolutely still. But more light helps. Dark and mysterious photos. I took this picture of something I built. I can't even tell what it is anymore. It's the back of it. It's dark. Everything's dark. It's not giving me any context. This image is not really, if I don't know what it is and I built it, it's not going to be useful to somebody reading my portfolio. And busy backgrounds. It's just really distracting. You can, if you look at this image for a while, you can start to get a sense that, oh, it's a cannon. But on first glance, and especially if you kind of squint your eye, everything runs together. It's all kind of the same tone. There's so much going on in the background. Everything's in focus. There's this horrible backlighting going on with those windows. Not a very good. So if you can get light, that will fix most of these problems. And I'll talk about some hints there. But also just repositioning the prop can solve a lot of lighting, framing, and background problems. So lighting. Things you could do to control your light. I'm not going to talk about like photography and cameras and flashes and all that. Well, besides the on-camera flash, all of that. I'm just going to talk about what you, possibly with a phone, possibly with a disposable camera, can do in your shop to control your light. Just moving it around and repositioning it under shop lights can help a lot, especially if you have like a grid of individual shop lights. Just go like directly under one instead of between 2 of them. If it's possible, bring your prop outside. The sunlight is going to be way brighter than any lights in your shop. If you have clip lights or work lights or any other sort of task lighting, you can bring these in to help add some more light. And then, of course, your camera might have a flash, and you could use that, but that's not really ideal, and I'll show you. So here is, again, that donkey mask. I was taking a picture of it. This was in the stage management closet, so a very tiny room with one light. And on the left, I'm holding it against the wall, and you can see it's backlit. You can't tell any of the paint detail. It's not really good lighting. Everything's in silhouette. And I just moved it to the floor and took the picture looking down at it. And that's a great way to take pictures of a lot of props because your top light is going to be the most light. So that's going to give you the most kind of even lighting over your prop. So one room, exact same lights, exact same camera, totally different results just from repositioning. And it's not something that took a lot of time. It's easily something you could do while you're working. Taking it outside is great. One thing to watch out for is direct sunlight. You can see in direct sunlight, every shadow becomes completely black and all that detail is lost. The contrast is just too high for a camera. So if you could find any sort of shaded area, use that instead. Take your props out on a cloudy day. Take them at dusk, something like that. Direct sunlight is not ideal for taking pictures, even though it seems like that's the most light. Clip lights and work lights, this little chest, I had one clip light off to the right, and then I had another little clip light off to the left, and then just the regular shop lighting. And you could see it gave it just a little pop that sets it apart from like a regular kind of snapshot. Like nothing fancy here, just two little clip lights. Again, that's something that's easy to set up, quick to take down, doesn't really add too much time to your process. Your on-camera flash is dreadful. I'm sorry. This is a picture I took with a flash, and all the light is just reflecting directly back at you, and you can't really see what's going on. So, you know, snapping pictures while the prop is backstage in the wings of the theater and no lights are on and you use the flash is not going to be the best way to take pictures to show your work. So avoid it as much as possible. Framing and backgrounds. So getting rid of those busy backgrounds is often as easy as just moving your prop or sticking something behind it as quick as possible. And the great thing about a prop shop is it's filled with all sorts of materials. So in the upper left, that's just a piece of fabric that was unrolled. Those lanterns were stuck on it. A photo was shot and the fabric was rolled back up. Upper right, just a brick floor. Bottom left, this is just a piece of black foam core and then a thin piece of plexiglass placed on top of it. So it looks like it's mirrored black. And then another piece of black foam core in the back. Again, small pieces of material that a lot of prop shops have and that are easy to set up really quick. It was taken with a nice camera too, I'll admit, but it you know, even just with the background, it makes a big difference. Same thing with the bottom right piece of melamine that a lot of shops have. It might have even just been the regular table, and then another piece of like white foam core in the back. Instant photo booth background. You can't ask for anything better than that. But even a quick backdrop can quickly elevate your photos. So here is a little lantern. And as you can see, my workbench is a mess. I placed that piece of fabric on top of tools and just clipped it up behind it and just framed it so that all of that was cropped out. And you get an image that does not distract. It's only showing the prop. It's a nice neutral background, and it's just muslin. It's something that so many shops have little scraps of. So keep that in mind. You know, can you throw something behind it? Can you reposition your prop against the blank wall? What can you do to make your prop stand out? And if it's too big or you don't have time to put a backdrop, just again, reposition it somewhere where there's less clutter. In the two bottom pictures, I just drag it out onto the stage or out onto the floor of the shop away from the walls and sort of take a picture from a sort of top angle looking down. So I capture mostly floor and much less walls. And the other two, they were outside, and I just kind of wheeled them around until I got the most neutral background I could. Something that, you know, on the upper right, it was different colors, it was a different texture. So think about that when you're taking pictures too. You have more than 1 second to take a picture, I promise. So I wanted to talk about collaborative projects too, because a lot of people ask, can I put in projects that I worked on with other people? And especially in theater, that's going to be most projects at a certain point. So you should definitely include anything you did at least 50% of. Or I like to say a project that you contributed a distinct portion to. If you painted a prop, if you built the steel structure for a prop, if you did the sculpting of a prop, if you did the upholstery of a prop. I say distinct portion because you shouldn't be putting stuff in if you kind of sanded a bit of it, or you like put the base coat on while the painter was mixing the final colors, things like that. It should be like a distinct portion that you had to do. And I like to take before and after pictures of that, because if it's a distinct portion, I can show what the prop looked like before I worked on it and what it looked like after I worked on it. And there should be a clear visual difference, and that's the best way to sort of show what you did on it. And then finally, yes, you can include a photo of the finished piece as long as you clearly indicate that other people worked on it and what they did on it. So an example of a before and after is this hutch. So this is useful for the carpenter. They can show, hey, look what I built. And then a painter painted it, and that was the final piece. This is also useful for the painter because they could say, look what it looked like before I painted it, and look what it looked like after I painted it. So these two pictures can be used by the two artisans who worked on this prop, each showing different things. So again, before and after pictures. So final thoughts on photography. Take photos at every step of your process. Never before in human history has so many people had cameras in their pockets at all times of the day. When I got started, I was having to buy disposable cameras and get them, the film developed. People had Polaroids. It was a pain. And now everybody has a camera in their pocket at all times. There's no excuse not to be taking photos at every step and then organizing and deleting photos later. Not deleting, just weeding out. Take photos before the item leaves your hand. You cannot predict that a prop is going to come back to you once it goes to the rehearsal hall or to stage. It might get destroyed before you see it again. You might not get to see the show for some reason. I don't know. But as soon as a prop leaves your hand, I have had props leave my hand and I never saw them again. And I'm like, I should have gotten a picture of it. Take the picture before it leaves your hands. Ask the other people to help take photos. They can take photos of you working. They can take photos of your prop if your hands are covered in paint and glue and you just want a photo at a certain point. They could take photos of you demoing a certain process. And likewise, take photos of other people when they ask you to, or ask them, hey, do you want a photo of this portion of your prop? Trade those photos with each other. Ultimately, it's up to you to get photos. Nobody's going to be telling you, like, that's a good prop, take a photo. You have to make that a part of your sort of daily life in props. A good photo, I mean, not quite finished item, is better than no photo at all. I mean, again, maybe the prop is leaving the shop and you're like, but I want to wait for it to get painted. But you might not see it after it's painted, or they might ruin it by painting it. Take a photo before it leaves, because otherwise it didn't happen. Final thought on photography: take photos. I cannot emphasize that. Also, don't apologize for anything in your portfolio. If you really feel like it needs an apology, then it probably does not belong. If you feel embarrassed by any work in your portfolio, that's your instinct telling you that you shouldn't be showing. But likewise, the stuff you're doing, it might be entirely appropriate for the level you're at. If you are new to your career, if you're applying to schools or internships, we are not expecting you to have perfect, amazing props in your portfolio. We are absolutely expecting you to have a few simple things, uh, the you know kind of the genesis of skills and things like that. You're not going to have the kinds of props that you see at regional theaters and Broadway and things like that. You're just getting started. So understanding that, don't show if you're proud of something, but you know that it's very beginner level. Don't apologize to the person looking at your portfolio. Just own it. Say, I'm a beginner and this is what I'm doing. And I'm showing you my portfolio because I want to go to your school or take your internship because I know it will improve my prop making skills. Finally, always seek feedback on your portfolio. Everything I've said is just my opinion. I try to base my opinion off of what's going on in the industry, but I still have my own biases, and the everybody else that you talk to is going to have slightly different biases and thoughts on your portfolio. And the more feedback you get, the more you can sort of consolidate it and get something approaching something that is spectacular. So spam does portfolio reviews a few times a year, virtual ones. I think the next one might be in August or September as people go back to school. Check USITT because their national and their regional conferences have portfolio reviews, and they also have a number of virtual ones throughout the year. If you participate in KCACTF, that's a great chance to get your portfolio reviewed as well. And SETC has portfolio reviewers at their conferences. But social media as well, I see all the time people post to the spam Facebook group, hey, I have a new portfolio. Can people take a look at it? Or posting to Instagram, new portfolio just dropped. Tell me what you think. As many people as you can get feedback from so that you can sort of get a wide range of opinions and thoughts, so that you're not kind of stuck in like, well, it has to be this because Eric Hart said so. No. So I hope this was helpful. That's about all I have on portfolios. But I do see we have a number of questions in the chat. Larry, do you want to give me them or?
Ta-da, here I am. Uh, sorry about that. I'm on like 4 screens right now and my mouse disappeared.
No.
In a moment of particular brilliance. So we do have some questions in the chat. Some have already been answered in the
Yes.
chat. The first one that came up was just about websites, and since holding a website domain can cost money, the question was, do you recommend setting up a site ASAP, or is it okay to hold off on having a website for those earlier in their careers? And I know you have an opinion about this. I, taught at a props program for 10 years, and I have opinions. But I mean, the answers that were posted were basically that there are lots of places where you can get a free website with their scrambled word domain. And then when you
Yes.
do have the money to do it, and I know that every once in a while, both Wix and Squarespace run specials where if you build the site with them, they give you your first year of hosting at a discounted rate. So that might be something to consider. It's
Yeah, I think getting a website, even on a free site, is good. I would avoid anything that puts too many ads on your website.
right,
But most of the time, you're going to be sending people the link and they're going to be clicking on it. It's not important to have something that's easy to remember in a domain name.
right.
So yeah, waiting off until you feel like it's a useful investment is definitely my advice.
Yeah. And then there was another question about clients requesting non-disclosure agreements on images in social media, and I answered that because the only time I've ever encountered that. Well, so there are two clients that I've worked with. One is Toyota,
Mhm.
and I do their annual, their big, gigantic 30,000 person event in Vegas every year. And there they have a specific, you can't take pictures of anything rule because the model year hasn't been released yet. But that's not props, that's just stuff associated with the show.
Yeah,
But I've also worked on films where basically the rule was don't post anything before the film is released. And then after the film is released, you're good to go. I think that's,
yeah,
I mean, for me, that's an item by item basis, and it's fairly rare.
yeah. And I know too, with theater, you have actors' equity, so you have to be careful about sharing images that have actors in them.
Right.
So the stuff I put on my website and social media adheres pretty strictly to that. I'm not sharing pictures with actors. I'm not sharing anything where I've signed an NDA, obviously. And even with theater, I'm not really showing props until the show like closes.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
If
that's the
it's a
thing is,
murder mystery, I don't want to give away the match.
yeah, and your process shots, you're generally up to your neck in scenic dope and paint while the process shots are being taken.
Yeah.
So the other question that came up was about artisans. Should all artisans that worked on a project be named in each person's portfolio?
I what I tend to do is if it's like a specific person I collaborated with, then sure, when it starts to be like an entire prop shop, then I'll sort of, I'll say, painted by the Santa Fe paint department
Right.
or painted by other artisans.
Yeah, I always base it on how much work, if I'm doing it, how much work I did, and if the lion's share of it is my project, I may throw credit, as you said, at the painter, but I don't know that I worked with another professor, a colleague who insisted that his lighting design students include everyone involved in the show in their portfolio page. And it ended up being like a paragraph and a half long. And it was just a lot. And it's
Yeah,
nice to give people credit, but I don't think it's necessary.
yeah. And
Yeah.
again, like with a portfolio, a few people are reading it. If it's social media, I find that much more helpful to tag other people. And especially like when I get to work with my students or apprentices, that's when I could really like, oh, my apprentice did the painting on this. Isn't that great?
Right.
Here's their Instagram page. So
Yeah.
tagging for sure.
And I also know that, I mean, I worked when I was very young, back in the late 80s. I worked with a group of prop masters who would regularly just throw the credit at their team. So it was always like, let's look at what Larry has built, and not and even though they had been involved, it was like they were comfortable enough in their world that they didn't worry about it. So that was nice too. So there are two more questions, and I don't know what our time limit is here, but I'm going to go ahead and take these last two, and then I think I'm gonna go ahead and cut it off. Yeah.
Sure.
Um, if you haven't had much experience in is making replicas of props from pop culture a good way to fill a portfolio?
I would say, yeah. Especially again, if you have a goal to make similar kinds of props, yes. If
Yeah.
they're replicas and you can have good inspiration images showing that you're able to build something to match a photograph is great. I
Yeah.
would say, besides replicas of props from pop culture, replicas of historical objects, same thing. If you can perfectly recreate something from a photograph, drawing, image, that shows a lot. Um,
I think that's huge. And it also, if you're able to manipulate materials and build
yes.
cool looking things,
Yeah.
like I got I got paid, probably this is going back probably about 20 years, but I got paid by a business that wanted it was so stupid. They wanted their um, president and VP and their board to walk on stage dressed as the Ghostbusters, and they needed the backpacks. And so I built, for this corporate event, I built, I think it was 12 backpacks, and it's just, but it was one of those things where it's like, wasn't for a movie, wasn't for a show. It was just something I did, but it's a great way to be able to get work. So yeah, I think it's great. Any recommendations for when you do a very wide range of things? I know you can adjust your portfolio for the situation, but what about websites? Should I be making lots of tabs? Is that the word? Or what would you do? What do you do if you're told to put up proof of the work that you've done, but you really didn't get along with the other people on the project, team members, directors, etc.? You mentioned if it needs an apology, it probably doesn't belong. But what if it's the situation rather than the work that you feel you need to apologize for?
Hmm.
I don't think, I mean, what do you think, Eric? I don't think anybody knows about your situation. And
Yeah, I guess like it all depends. If you're proud of the work and the work stands on its own, then sure,
yeah,
put it up. Um,
the first part of the question is important to me, and that is about that laundry list of how do you
yeah,
demonstrate all the stuff that you know.
yeah, it's tricky, and I'll, yeah, I mean, we all have so many different things we're interested in. Um, you know, every once in a while, I run across somebody who has like they're really good at two very different things, and they're so different that I say like this needs to be two different websites.
Yeah,
Like you need to have your uh, props website, and you need to have your, let's say, personal art website, because
yeah,
they're just
yeah.
so different, and you shouldn't be not showing any of that stuff. Um, so yeah,
But
like I have a whole lot of, photography, but
right.
and that informs me as an artist, but that wouldn't fit in my props portfolio. That needs to be a different portfolio.
Yeah, and my situation, I have a kind of a hybrid portfolio because I'm a designer, but I also have props work.
Yeah.
And so I have just a series of it looks like a photo album, and then you click on the images and it opens
Mhm.
an array. And I've identified them with different headings, but like my private commission work and artwork, that's on a separate menu,
Yeah.
not in my
Mhm.
portfolio. That doesn't go in my portfolio.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I would just throw into this, because I just feel it, is, having a list of all the things that you do is great on your resume. I don't know that you necessarily need to demonstrate every single one of those items. And so, like when I'm grading artwork, what I used to do was I would make 5 piles. I would do the A pile, the B pile, the C pile, and the D pile. And then the fifth pile is the outliers, the people who exceeded all expectations and who it would be really unfair to grade the A's against, because these people are like insane, brilliant, genius wizards or whatever. I think that that's actually a good thing where you have to be honest with yourself and sort of lay out stacks of your work and just decide is which of these things do I really want to show?
Yeah.
And that's where you go from there rather than trying to demonstrate everything. Because when we're hiring, we see people who are just throwing laundry lists of stuff at their portfolio, and we recognize that and identify it. And it
Yeah.
might be better to just have an in-depth look at like the top 4 things that you do. That's my opinion. And like
Yeah.
you
And
said, everybody's got opinions, right?
I find like a lot of the stuff I do is condensable. So I I've done a lot of work as a props carpenter, and you build a lot of tables. And so at a certain point, it's like I don't need every table to be there,
Right.
because if I have one really good table, that demonstrates table building skills, right? What, like, think about what skills is each prop showing, and can you actually condense it?
Exactly.
Or on the other end, do you need to sort of really split your website into two parts? I think either of those is, without looking at their portfolio, those would be my
Yeah,
suggestion.
I think that's great. I think this is a good place to stop. Eric, thank you so much for this evening. It was amazing. I learned a lot and I am, old. So I just love hearing you and seeing what you do and listening to your ideas because they're just so great and informative. Thanks to everybody for attending. I hope it was a fun and informative evening. Um, I believe that we are going to have somebody winning one of Eric's books, but I don't have that person's name yet. So, but stay tuned in your email and social media for more Spaminars. Those will be coming soon. If you're interested in joining Spam and are a working prop manager in a nonprofit theater, opera company, or children's theater, or you're an educator who teaches prop classes, please visit our website or click the link in the chat to fill out our membership form. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Links are in the chat. Spaminar is produced by the Society of Props Managers, with special thanks to Spam members Patrick Drone, Freed, Ben Homan, Nikki Kulis, Jen McClure, Amy Peters, Sarah Pugh, Karen Rabe Vance, and Helen Stratakis. Sorry, I always get that one wrong. Thanks again for attending. And once again, keep your suggestions for future Spaminars coming because we really need those. We want to know what you want to learn about. Prop on. Have a wonderful night. The end.
Thanks, everybody.